good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you guys are based. So, today, we want to speak about vulnerability, how to embrace it, and why it connects us in a true way. What is, first of all, the Failure Institute? The Failure Institute is the research arm of Fuck Up Nights. Maybe you can press the next slide, please. Um, the Philistines, as what I was saying, is a research arm of Fuck Up Nights. It was born in that way, and it quickly evolved into our content platform. And with this tool, we're providing with life-changing experiences for individuals to have a better life and to break the paradigms both at work and at home. So our aim is to provide with certain experiences and tools that can help you be the best version of yourself. And this research arm is from Fuck Up Inc. And Fuck Up Inc., as you might know, is a global event series dedicated to share stories of business and professional failure. So we're big fans of having the difficult conversations, the conversations that matter, and those conversations that are sometimes a bit tricky to have. And today we will speak about, as we said before, how to be more vulnerable or how to show your vulnerability. And we want to picture it with a quick example, which is a quarantine dilemma. Most of us have been in lockdown for several weeks or months. Right now in Spain, we've been 2 years and 2 years, not so much, but it felt like it. 2 months in lockdown and slightly having a little bit more of flexible measures to go out, which taste like glory. And I don't know if you felt it, but during this quarantine and coronavirus situation, there's a big dilemma that has been brought to us that kind of pictures some of the issues we might have as a society. And so we have a global pandemic, and that's making us feel unsafe, uncertain, emotional, volatile, because we don't have any guarantee about the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in a few months' time, both in business and our personal lives. And that makes us feel a bit more insecure. We lost that security we could attach to when things went a bit south. And we're not completely sure on how to handle the situation. Um, Please feel free to post in the chat if you felt that way. But we feel that it's kind of normal in these situations to feel anxious, even depressed, melancholic. It's a normal reaction to what's happening and something that has been acceptable given the fact uh, that the circumstances we're living right now are a bit different from what we're all used to. But very quick, that happened in the first few weeks. We started seeing posts on social media like this one that I'm going to show you right now, and where people basically here you can read, if you don't come out of this quarantine with either a new skill, starting what you've been putting off, like a new business, more knowledge, you didn't even lack the time, you lack the discipline. So suddenly you need to rock at this quarantine. So everyone is killing it. Everyone is doing exercise, being super productive, launching new businesses, starting MBAs, developing new skills, reading 4 books per day. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll see that uh, there's a little dilemma between being productive or anxious. So what the hell is happening? Sometimes I can't see my family members and friends. I work with kids at home and they say hi in every important Zoom meeting and to important clients. I feel I'm failing as a partner with my couple or as a parent or even as an employee. That's affecting my productivity. I don't even sit 1 hour to have lunch and to have my meal, and I still need to be rocking it on top of that and do crazy exercise in the morning, the afternoons, cook amazing bakery, etc. Or for instance, I lost my job, and I even if I try to keep myself productive, I feel anxious because I'm trying to do too much at a time and I'm losing focus. So I don't know. We'd like to ask you if you've ever felt that kind of wrong balance between being productive or anxious, if you're putting more hours into work than you did when you were at the office, if you're feeling a bit lost. And those, there are probably many reasons that create this dissonance we're living right now. And we want to point out a few today. And I'll pass on the microphone to my colleague Eric, who will continue with it.
Hi, everyone. Well, we believe that this, as Yannick said, this dissonance between productivity or anxious, it's caused because of a few things. First of all, is that we live in a black versus white scales, right? Successful versus failure, winner versus losers, even the narrative of life versus death. And suddenly we end up playing a game and trying to win it and make it a constant struggle, kind of a battle of survival, trying to maintain us always in the positive side of the tale, in the good side of the narrative, right? But taking perspective that black versus white, it's not. It's more like black and white that are aspects of a whole and not contraries, instead a little bit necessary to exist one another. Without black we don't have white, simple as that. And taking that perspective, it's no longer a struggle, but it's complementary, right? And we stop fighting to maintain us always in the right side of the things, apparently. The next one, Ricardo, please. And another thing that affects us when we are trying and dealing with anxiety is that we continuously, and align with the other slide, that we continuously keep aiming for sanity, right? To be fine, to be cool. Uh, but the current situation and the human experience itself, it's naturally tend to be a little bit more messy than just fine. We have a complex history. Our system, it's constantly reforming. uh, Things change too fast. We experience devastating losses, and our gaps between hopes and realities always are stretching and reaching and stretching, right? So just logically, it makes no sense aim for sanity. Just doing the maths, uh, we try to keep it linear, but life seems to be more like a roller coaster, right? So align the bottom from School of Life, explore a concept named sane insanity. And this is not about being crazy, don't get me wrong, but it's about having an aware and a mature relation with our own insanities. It's about knowing that things are not and will not be always fine, and don't have this pressure and troubling desire of insisting in normalcy, right? It's admit with good grace, without losing self-esteem, that we're deeply peculiar individuals, and that's okay. And when you think of the idea of letting go, this reaching for sanity, it's kind of relieving. Understand this not doesn't make magically disappear the pain or the anxieties that we might suffer, but it helps a little bit to make peace with the fact that it's going to happen, right? The next one. So if we have these two previous concepts metabolized, we should accept watching those publications and say like, nope, I don't buy it. I process things on my own way, and there's no rush to be productive. And this is actually a very complicated situation. So fuck it and throw away social carpet, like in the meme, but what really happens, or it's more relative, the next one is that we collapse and we crash in all social expectations of ourselves, right? And we think that this is provoked or starts with a misconception of what vulnerability is. So we want to dig a little bit more in the concept and in the roots. Next one. So let's start with what is vulnerability. And I want you to do an exercise with you. Please write in the chat. You can write it here. The first word that came to your mind if I say vulnerable or vulnerability. Don't think the first word, courage, naked. Thank you, Pia. Open, fragile. Thank you. Broken. Anyone else? Just write it down. Open, exposed. Nice. Thank you for all your participations. Sickness. Thank you, Marco. Please write it down. We want to engage with you in these all experiences to get to know each other. Perfect. As we see, we have a variety of concepts here, but normally with what we associate vulnerability is with weakness, right? With sickness, broken, fragile. And this is the importance, because this is how prejudices work, right? It is established in the deeper layer of our brain when we associate some characteristic, some word to another concept. So this is the importance of defining the right mental paradigms or mindset, as we call it. It's key because that's where all our behaviors, actions, and habits are going to drive us. So in Fuck Up, our North Star, as you might know, is to help people break free from the paradigms that live in their lives. And that's the intention of these experiences, to create a safe space where you can doubt, you can redefine, and you can clear concepts that you have created. But all this with all external pressures that you have to be someone, that you have to do something, not expectations, just freedom to choose wherever meaning that you have. Next one. So let's start to see what really vulnerability is. Take a few seconds to picture this. If the purpose of this whole thing wasn't about winning or losing, being right or being wrong, being accepted or being rejected, how would your true self look like? How would you be your true version, your most authentic person? Imagine a little bit. Because when we have the possibility, sorry?
Barbara mentioned in love in chat. Steven, relax.
Because that's when you have all the possibilities and the chances to be whoever you want, that's what vulnerability is. It's not necessarily has to be associated with weakness, but to have the opportunity to show yourself as you truly are. And this could be in a weaker version, but it also could be in a stronger version with we have in a context where all is so calm and we are more out loud. That could be also vulnerability. Or we could be more serious version because I don't want to laugh at everyone's joke all day, right? That also could look like vulnerability. So the important is to have the space to be true to yourself, right? The next one, please. Spoiler panda alert. So the million question, how can we start, right? So the thing that you need to think in is that we tend to assimilate that first we need to build trust, and then person will be able to show their vulnerable side. But that's the tricky part because vulnerability doesn't come after trust. It has to precede it. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but no worries. Uh, this is because we every always try to come as a strong person to project perfection, knowledge, to my glasses show I am smart and etc. Because that's what we need to show for people. But I want you to think in your closest friend that you have, in your best friend. Got it? Are you thinking in the funny moments where she or he fell off the stairs, probably drunk? When you're vulnerable, you get exposed to others. Exactly. So, with that image, I want you to think a little bit more on how it happens. Friendship is the result of being grateful of that acceptance that other human being has offered you something very valuable to him or her, and this is called intimacy, right? That bitter moment they share, that sad day, that falling off the stairs drunk, transform strangers into friends. So that's pretty simple when it works with friends, but it gets a little bit more complicated with my boss. Doesn't seem to fit in, right? Because we have this constant struggle and anxiety that whether people are going to like us or not, right? We base all our approaches in that assumption. So the key point is to take the first step and being that intimate, provoke intimacy, right? We connect with people because of what we do more than that we are. So the first approach is what's important and is usually how vulnerable starts. So what if we were told that the true enable of empathy is intimacy, and that we connect more actually with people from the weird and the bizarre and the authentic side, more than the strong version and intellectual version of us, right? Would that change our normally approaches on our daily life with others?
Thank you,
Next.
Eric. So now we're gonna see a little bit how we see vulnerability at work. And as Eric mentioned before, we have those intimate moments with friends, those not so glamorous conversations that very unlikely happen with team members and especially bosses. So, how can we feel like with our friends but at work, or how can we feel as free as this panda on our professional environment? And at Focus Nights, we like to always tell you what we think it's not the right thing to do. And I'm the Failure Institute. So there's here, if you connect, 4 ways to fuck up the trust in your team. And the the first one is that there are I want to say that there are several dysfunctions that directly impact the absence of trust between team members. The first one is the lack of spaces to open up, when team members don't want to open up, or when there are not physical spaces in the organization where they can actually open up. So when team members aren't committed to openly accept the mistakes, the things they did wrong, their own weaknesses, whenever they have a bad day, it is really hard for trust to succeed in these teams and in these organizations. And this failure in building trust takes us to the second dysfunction, which is fear of conflict. So with no trust, people hardly enter discussions, hardly discuss different points of view. It is very difficult for them to propose new ideas and to propose that with passion. Basically, they want to stick to be formal, to have calculus conversations, to measure their words, and they avoid to take a stand when they see something's it's wrong, or when they see a red light. They basically want to avoid conflict. What happens is that we're not having what we call at the Failure Institute and Fuck Up Nights the difficult conversations. People are not having the difficult conversations. And this fear of conflicts translates into lack of commitment. And that's like the next dysfunction. When individual opinions don't really matter for a project within the organization, employees don't truly accept certain decisions. They might say they agree with this project or with this decision in a meeting, but really they don't feel the project as if they participated actively in it. They don't feel the project as theirs, and that directly affects ownership. So in these circumstances, those individuals probably prefer to avoid certain responsibilities. They prefer not to speak up. And with that, it's harder to keep projects in the right path, with the right action plan, and with natural leadership. So people just work for someone else, do project for someone else, but they don't really want to get involved, to get their hands dirty and really dig into the real issues to make the best out of it. And when we're not mutually responsible, uh, there's this fourth dysfunction that can easily dominate the working atmosphere. And that is lack of attention to results. And that happens when team members put their own needs, and with own needs, we mean their own ego, their personal career or professional career, their recognition above the collective goals. And that can really make us lose focus and lose the magical thing that teams have, which is working as a collective. And it's exactly what we, and that's a vicious circle that can take us to a very negative environment, that what we've discussed in other sessions, which are environments of psychological danger, environments where people are not comfortable with being themselves. And that's like putting the handbrake to better idea generation, innovation, commitment, engagement, and perseverance. And as a leader, how can we be vulnerable leaders, and how this affects? So in the first point, we think that stories and intimacy, like Eric was mentioning before, is where real connection starts. And I want to put an example here that I love about one of our team members. The first time someone joins the team, we do an open session with everyone where they can introduce themselves. And she did what we like to call the anti-introduction, and started to say all the things that were not negative about her, but unconventional, let's say, and everything you would never say in a job interview, or anything that a person would avoid the first day at job to give the right impression to someone. She took a stand because she know our values and what we stand for, and that really created a sense of trust and commitment, that you felt you really knew someone from a very long time, and you just had that person in a virtual call for 5 minutes. Now we're all good friends, still with us, but that's a quick example of how difficult can it be to be yourself and how empowering it is to create the right connections. So as a leader, we need to empower stories and intimacy to be spoken about. Another thing is that vulnerability helps us take moral decisions, and vulnerability creates empathy, and empathy makes people understand that we're humans working with human beings. And it's easier to take those difficult conversations and manage them and take them to the right moral decisions when we put vulnerability before and we show ourselves as not completely perfect. And there's also an example here that is probably happening in lots of organizations around the world. Probably many of you have been struggling financially due to the COVID-19 crisis. Probably some of you have lost jobs. And in organizations, there have been a lot of conversations to be taken. And a lot of conversations that can create rage, that can create a lack of trust, a lack of team building. And for instance, could consider two options. We reduce the salaries of all the organization, or we start firing people. You try to put that on the table and let the people be participative of that discussion. And we do that to preserve the best for the organization and the best for the employees. And when people really see the vulnerability of a leader, showing that they're not the best days for the organization, but that together we can fight it, we're all going to suffer. How can we translate that into people that are still committed with our profession? And then Marco is mentioning that lack of goals, vision, or KPIs also affect the result that you want to achieve. Of course, I am completely with you on that. And that's something that really, well, a little bit quickly we checked up there in the slide before on how that makes you lose ownership and be less results oriented. And then we're going with vulnerable leadership. Nothing that we need to encourage.
Sorry, Yannick. And according to the vulnerability, help us take moral decisions. This decision was super difficult for the team. Everyone in the meeting were a little bit shocked, but deeply and inside us, we knew that it was the right decision to make, right? According to all interests. So taking, as Yannick said, the vulnerable part of before taking some decision is going to help you to stay in the right path in morality, not about efficiencies or about optimizations, but the difficult conversations. Sorry.
Thank you, Eric, for complimenting. And then another thing is be curious about your team members. We see a lot of meetings where people just have a one-on-one or a team meeting. From the first second, we go directly into the operations. And that may be seen as something really productive. But if every single meeting is like that, and especially now that we don't have coffee breaks with people, where we can't just have a quick conversation in between meetings with others because we're most of us doing remote work, it is very important to save some time to speak with your team, to be curious, to ask about themselves, if they have a passion, something that's not related at all about with work, but ask for it and see how you can help them achieve what really makes them happy outside of their professional lives. And that's something that is rarely seen in big organizations or in fast-paced environments, and something that is not always checked as a priority. And we personally believe that is one of the highest priorities, to create that bond, to create interest, and to really care for the people you work with. Then another thing that is encouraging kindness. Being kind traditionally has been seen as the opposite of being a boss. So there are bosses of all kinds. There are many kinds of leadership. You can combine them, but really the corporate world, capitalism, fast-paced environments, aggressive markets, really don't have a big space for kindness. And we see leaders have people strict that don't take things personal and that we shouldn't take personal anything they do or say. In the end, we're humans working with humans, and being kind is very, very important. We believe that it's the base of good relationship, and that works at a professional environment, and it works at home. It works with your kids. It works with your husband or wife, and that's something we should always keep encouraging as a leader and as employees. Encourage kindness in every single step we take.
And also a little bit in culture, right? Because we need to resignify what kindness is and stop associating with naiveness, with naive, with being like a little bit dumb, a little bit easy to handle. We start need to start considering like kindness as a top priority to construct vulnerability and strong relationships. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. This real connection, right, with our colleagues.
Exactly. Thank you, Eric, so much. Um, and finally, then it's important to seek excellence instead of perfectionism. We have been historically aiming perfectionism. We want to be perfect in our lives, in Instagram, in our profession. And perfectionism is very tricky because perfectionism aims for everything to be perfect. And there's no space for flaws. If there's flaw, it's not perfect, then I'm failing. So if everything is perfect and static, then absolutely fantastic. The problem is that in real life, nothing is static. Success is not static. Failure is not static, and perfectionism is not static. So we should be seeking excellence instead of perfectionism. And what excellence means is to be the best version of ourselves professionally. So be the best you can be and make your team the best that it can be. Also make the organization the best it can be with the resources we have. It doesn't mean to be perfect. It means to be the best you can be. And that's something that evolves. That level of excellence can always get higher. Perfectionism cannot get higher. It's perfect or it's not. And that makes people be more tolerant with when things go south. It makes people be more resilient, and people feel a bit less um, overwhelmed when they are improving every day. We in Pokemon we like to say be 1% better every day. Whenever you do in your personal life, in your professional life, try to be 1% better, and that gives room for us not being perfect. That gives room for us to have flaws, for us to fail, and to document these setbacks and analyze them to make us a bit better version of ourselves for the next day. And how to build empathetic relations. So an important one is the first one, which is a similar situation can have very different realities. If you want to continue with that one, Eric.
Yep, Ricardo, can we next? Perfect. So this works for this crisis, but also in our daily lives. We may have similar situations. We may be in the same company, struggling with the same issues and having same setbacks, but our realities are totally different. right? We cannot assume that myself is I'm training, I'm learning languages, I'm being productive, I'm having a gorgeous girlfriend, I'm intellect, etc. I cannot assume that other person is going to be or going to have the same reality. So skipping assumptions, it's the first principle to engage in a more empathetic way, right? When we start concerning about others' realities and not assuming that everyone is struggling with the same, we can start having a sane relationship.
And that's to make things timely as well. That's something really common with the current situation. Some people are completely enjoying remote work. Some people are not severely affected by being in quarantine. They are actually finding peace, learning about themselves. They can still manage the time, be productive, not feel anxious. And that's brilliant. The problem is when we assume that everyone in our team should be the same way. Probably some other people, even though they have the similar salaries, similar working in similar projects, and in the same situation, that doesn't mean that they are taking it as easy and as happy as you. So it's very important, as Eric said, to skip assumptions and to understand that exactly the same situation for someone can have a very different reality. That's something we often forget to take into consideration. Go to next, Ricardo, please.
That's also the previous one. Get along with the curiosity about your team. We have like a fun Friday about how we were struggling with this situation. Personally, I confess that I don't know what are the days that I'm feeling the most of me and what are the days that I'm feeling blue. I couldn't figure out what is happening and what is triggering my productivity. But just that, confess that I don't know. And perhaps Yannick is struggling with other situations, but asking about how you are dealing with this is the because I understand now how to treat better or how to work better with or each person. And the second, to build empathetic relations and to start being more vulnerable, is to be the person you want to be, as our manifesto said. And this is about authenticity came through awareness, right? First, we need to ask ourselves who we truly are and define that version, uh, taking off all the social assumptions, all the social expectations, and then we can start projecting our inner and true self to others and communicating rightly, right? But first, we need to define who we are really true. And the next one. The next one is acting from a place of love. And the next one, please, is a little bit to joining the other 2 points. To every time you can help another colleague to support their ideas, the situation, understanding their struggles. Uh, Anytime you can do it, please do it, because you need to build this allyship and this support in your team, because perhaps you are going to be fine some days and other is going to help you, has happened to all of us. So giving this extra support to your team, acting from a place of love, is key to start a empathetic relation.
Thank you, Eric. We see acting from a place of love, continue with what Eric was saying, as something that goes two ways. One thing is do the best you can, uh, be good. If there's any definition of good, then be that definition of good. But also act from a place of love with assumptions and expectations from the rest. sometimes when we're in the rush, it's very easy to think the worst of someone. So they didn't send their reports on time because they were scratching their belly because they're lazy, and I've been working my ass off and they haven't. For us, acting from a place of love is understanding that others are also acting from a place of love. And if they're not sending the report on time, probably they have a family issue. So ask first, how's everything at home? How's everything in your personal life? Is there something I can help you with rather than starting with accusations? And that doesn't mean that always people are the best version of themselves. That doesn't mean that people always act from a place of love. But we've seen that when you start with this dynamic of doing the best you can and expecting everyone to do the best they can, and not only expecting but also believing, that creates a culture of trust and authenticity where you understand that there's some things in life that also affect directly our productivity. One day our productivity will be skyrocketing, the next day probably not, and there's always a valid reason for it. Let's try to understand it and see how we can help it, and that creates a space where it's easy to speak up and say, guys, today I have to take a sick day, and I'm not sick, but I broke up with my girlfriend, with my boyfriend, and I really need time to cure my mind. And that's very hard to to find in certain working environments. And it's kind of easy to build this through acting of place of love, to showing yourself vulnerable, and to be okay with the flaws we have all as human beings that we are. And we believe like showing, if we go next please, like showing vulnerability uh, creates a better version of yourself. A good example is at Fuck Up Nights, we have 3, 4 speakers in each event in sharing their largest professional failure stories, right? And we have these speakers in 300 cities in many countries. So we've spoken with thousands and thousands and thousands of speakers. And something they always tell us is that I was so scared to jump on stage and share my weaknesses. I thought that would be ridiculous, and the result has been all the opposite. I feel a new version of me. I feel way more aware of what I should be, of what I did wrong in the past. It helped me have more clarity about what's the my real purpose, and also I feel more confident in general. Not only for speaking about my failures, but I feel more confident for coming into my next job interview, or for having my next keynote speech in front of 1,000 people, or speaking with my boss for a difficult conversation. So showing yourself vulnerable really has the opposite effect of what many think it may have. It doesn't make us weaker, it makes us stronger. Then it helps with building better teams, and that's something we've seen. When people are happy at work, they're more productive and they enjoy more. So it's a win-win. We make happier individuals, we make more productive teams and organizations, and also it creates a better relationship among team members and among individuals. So you can apply this to your work or your love relationships. It's something that really creates deeper connections and a sense of empathy and connection that is very hard to find when we put our own egos or our own beliefs or our own fears interfering with our relationships. And this has been a little capsule of the content we are providing with the Failure Institute and subscription. We're gonna do lots of sessions like this one with different topics. Our aim is to set people free from the paradigms that limit their lives. And as we've said many times, both at work and at home. And for us to know, for you to know, we will be sending you a report of this session with extra content that we didn't go too deep into. And we will also share the recording in case you want to, you can join the whole session or you want to share it with someone else. And it would be great to hear your ideas. I want also to say thank you so much for being here with us. We've been running these sessions for a long time already with different with different topics, some of them very related to business, very related to corporate world and HR, some of them more focused on entrepreneurship. But right now we're doing all of them under the Failure Institute digital subscription, which we just launched on Thursday. We have more than 200 subscribers already. We can't believe it, really. It's been way more successful, if that word is allowed, in the Failure Institute than we thought. And we want to say thanks to all of you for being these early adopters, helping us deliver content that we believe needs to be shared. And also, we're super open about any feedback and any specific content you'd like to see discussed in these webinars and sessions. So thank you so much for being here with us.